Welcome to the House of Truth. Today I'm going to explain the biblical calendar, how it works, the nuts and bolts of it. There's other issues that people may need to look at. We've discussed perhaps in other episodes about particular holidays and the like. But today we're just looking at the nuts and bolts, how the biblical calendar works, so people can understand it. And we're going to start. And I made a PowerPoint this time, a little slideshow to help people. There's some illustrations to help people understand. And we're going to start in the beginning here in Genesis chapter 1, verses 14 and 19. And God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of heaven to divide the day from night. And let them be for signs and for seasons, for days and years. Let them be for lights in the firmament of heaven to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the night from darkness. And God saw it was good. In the evening, in the morning, were the fourth day. So there's a thing that I want to draw out to you here. First of all, these lights is referring to as the sun and the moon, in particular, plus the stars, but the sun and the moon primarily. And day here really should be translate daytime would be a little bit better accurate, because a day can mean the daytime part, the Hebrew word, or it can mean a roughly 24-hour period, which we'll look at. But here it really means daytime. So divide the daytime from the nighttime. And the sun and the moon are there for signs and seasons and days and years. So notice we already have years here too, this ideal of years. There's so many days that can make up a year. And there's going to be seasons inside the year. So the first thing I want you to notice, there's daytime and nighttime. Now, the next thing I want you to notice, and of course, what rules them, besides how much light there is in the context here, is the sun and the moon. In the daytime, how long you have 100% daylight, and so on and so forth, is determined by the sun. And of course, it's really the Earth's position around the sun as we're going around, but the sun's still the deciding factor there. And at night, it's the moon, where you can have practically no light. You can have no light from the moon. It'd be very dark on a null moon, sometimes called a new moon on astronomical charts. Or you can also have so much moon, you can have a full moon and have so much that's bright enough to either harvest, depending on the time of year, or hunt. They're called harvest moons and hunter moons. And so they're a super bright full moon. So you don't need a flashlight, you can be out at night, with enough visibility to do some of these kind of things. So those do that. And then the last thing I want you to notice is this thing, the day is divided into four parts, not two, daytime and nighttime, as I discussed, but also evening and morning, which are transition periods. From nighttime to daytime from daytime to nighttime is a transition period of day, is one transition period, and from nighttime to daytime is the other transition period. Then notice the evening comes first. So the day begins when the evening begins, which is again the transition period that starts at sunset. Now, look at some more fundamentals here about these days, because they're arranged a certain way. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, all the hosts of them. On the seventh day, God ended his work which he had made, and he rested the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. So I want to draw your attention here is that there's 7 days here, and they make a week. The concept of a week was from the beginning. It's not something that people just came up later with or whatever. It's been from the beginning. In most societies, the concept's been there. There's been occasional occasions where someone got off, like the Romans had an 8-day week for kind of an 8-day week where they had 7 work days. They had a week, then they had a market day because they really needed a day for them to go to the store. I mean, brings their stuff in to sell and buy stuff they need it. So a market day. But by and large, most societies throughout history have had a 7-day week, and it started here at the beginning. And it's no different than the biblical. So the biblical calendar has days that have 4 parts, divided into 4 parts, and 7 days make a week. And we're looking at one more here in Psalms 113:3 that kind of reinforces some of the things I've already said. And that is from the rising of the sun to going down the same, the Lord's name is to be praised. Okay, so the daytime here in this context is defined as the rising of the sun to the going down of the same. So from sunrise, when the sun's all the way up, to when the sun's all the way down, is daytime. Because if you look, again, the context would imply it's in the day. That's when all the sacrifices were done at the temple and that kind of thing, or in the day. Okay, so now I'm gonna go to my power show. I'm gonna go to my slideshow and present to you the biblical calendar, explain the structure of a biblical day. And I'm just going to explain the day right now. We'll focus on the others later. Okay, and what determines it again is 100% sunlight versus 0% sunlight. Again, how much light you get at night is determined by the moon, which of course reflects in the sun. It's light, but we still call it moonlight. Nobody calls it reflected sunlight. So there's no sunlight, and that's not so. When you go, but you have this transition period. I want you to notice, and we'll start here. We'll start here in the morning. You got daybreak, and like the day I was up before the sun was up, and I was watching. And if you've ever done this, you notice it. Like I'm in Texas currently. The sun, you start seeing some sunlight about an hour before the sun you actually see the sun pop up all the way. Okay, before the sun rises, and it varies from location to location and where you are and where and what time of year. But this kind of gives you kind of an idea. That's probably right, kind of an average for like Israel and places like that. It's about an hour. So day breaks when you're under 100%, you're at 0% sunlight. Now you have 1% and 2%, and so on and so forth. You want to think of it in minutes. You're gaining a little bit less than 2% per minute, 1/2% per minute, going along until you finally an hour's gone by and the sun's up all the way. And that's morning. So from night to morning, now daytime. Well, at the end of daytime, the sun goes down. But if you've ever been out there and watched the sun go down, it's not like on a cartoon, instantly dark. No, you don't. You still have sunlight leaking over the horizon. You can't see the sun, but the light's still making it over. And again, it takes about an hour. In that transition period of decreasing, again from 100 now down to 0, is called evening. And the sunlight, and then when you get to 0% again, you're at nighttime again, and that's called nightfall. So, our dividing lines are daybreak when you first get some sunlight, sunrise and the sun's fully risen, sunset when the sun's fully set, nightfall when you have no daylight again. Okay, so that's it, but that's not how you define a biblical day. I'm just kind of giving you a time pattern based on the sun. Give you an idea. A biblical day starts in the evening, as we saw, and really technically it's at the even. You see this little green line I got in the middle here. The even is technically the midway point between when the sun fully sets and nightfall happens, so there's no sunlight at all. But it's really hard to observe that naturally. We get, of course, if we know how long it takes, we can go watch and calculate it, but if you're just sitting outside, you don't know. So the way it's viewed is evening's an overlap. It's the day one doesn't end as soon as the sun sets. It actually, technically it ends at the evening, but because you don't know when the even is, the Bible will treat it as it ends for certain at nightfall. When nightfall happens, it's certainly over. Because someone has transitioned, it's certainly happening. Day 2 is the same thing. The next day, although it technically begins at the even, can't really say when it is. So at sunset, it's considered a start. And and it will go on till, and it will go on, it will go on to the next day. So from sunset forward, until you hit nightfall time, then of course it's only, there's that during that transition period, you have an evening that's ending one day, and that same time period is also the evening that begins the other day. Because again, the even point where you're literally right in the middle, where you're at 50% of sunlight, is just really hard to tell when you're outside or whatever. So this is how the biblical day is set up. Okay, now we're going to go back and look some more at scripture about some other setups, and we're going to look at some more scriptures more about the calendar. And next thing we're going to look at is the month. In Numbers 28, 1 through 14. In the beginning of your months, you shall offer a burnt offering to the Lord, 2 bullocks, 1 ram, and 7 lambs of the first year without spot, 3 tenths dill of flour for a meat offering, mingled with oil, with 1 bullock and 2 tenths dill of oil flour for a meat offering, mingled with oil for 1 ram, and a several tenths dill of flour mingled with oil for a meat offering under 1 lamb, for a burnt offering, a sweet savor sacrifice made by the Lord. And the drink offering shall be half a hin of wine to a bullock, and a third of a hin of wine to a ram, and a fourth part of a hin unto a lamb, the burnt offering for every month throughout all the months of the year. So first thing I want you to know is our year is now divided in months, but they're not months like we're used to the Gregorian calendar. We got 12 months and of a predictable length every month, and we got a leap year. February's a little longer, whatever. They work a little differently. In fact, you actually can end up with a leap month, which I'll explain a little bit. Okay, but some years you have a leap month where there's 13 months, and I want you to notice the priest has to know when this month begins, because on the first day of the month he has to make these extra sacrifices on top of the others. He also has to blow the trumpets over the sacrifices. Which, of course, well, one thing God commands and gets God's blessing. Other thing is, of course, everyone's in the vicinity of Jerusalem, where the temple's at, or tabernacle, hears them in those. The first of the month has been signaled. However, that's daytime by then, or morning perhaps. So. But it's still night's over, and we'll see why that's important in a minute here. So it's important we know when the month begins. And here we go in Isaiah 66:23 tells you what defines a month in the biblical calendar. Again, it's not a set number of days arranged with a named month, and that name, August has 31 days, July, September has 30, that kind of thing. No, it's from one new moon to another. The word month and new moon is actually the same word. Okay, from one new moon to another, just like one Sabbath to another every week. So it shall come to pass from one new moon to another, from one Sabbath to another, all flesh shall come to worship before me, says the Lord. So I want you to notice that. So but what this new moon, is this the astronomical new moon we're talking about? Which is, you have to calculate. The moon goes dark. There's a moment, sometimes called the null moon. Well, technically, it's only totally dark for a moment. Otherwise, you might be able to see with the aid of a telescope or something. You can see a little bit. Is it talking about that? No. The Hebrew word here is kodesh. It literally means it literally means renewed moon, as in the light in it was renewed. Remember, the moon rules the night and determines times and seasons. Well, this is one of those times when the month begins. So you've got a renewed moon. The light of it's been renewed. It's not the total dark moon, the dark moon of the null moon, as people sometimes call it. Again, there's one more important reason why this is super important to get the first day of the month right, and it's right here in Luke 5, 4, and 6. Now, when he left speaking, he said, Simon, launch out in the deep and let down your nets for a draught. And Simon answered and said, Master, we've toiled all night and taken nothing. Nonetheless, at your word, I'll let down the net. When they had done this, they enclosed a great multitude of fish, and their net broke. So I want you to notice this. What's the important thing here I want to really zero in on is we've toiled all night. Remember we saw about when the day starts. Well, when does the month start? Well, Zillow said, well, it's the first day of the month is when you see the new moon, the crest of the new moon. You know, and if that's at night, if that's at 3 a.m, it's 3 a.m. And now they get out there like someone's out there at night watching, and they blow the trumpets and everyone knows is now the problem is there's at least one instance where there's one instance we'll look at where you're not doing any work on the first day of the month. And it's super important that you know when that is before you start working all night. So you can't really just observe at night and you say, this night, oh, I saw it at 3 a.m. This night is it, or I saw it an hour even after an hour after nightfall. You have to at least know before nightfall. So people who work at night, and of course not necessary work like being an amateur, but like this, fishing, nowhere or not, they need to work or they have to rest, particularly in the one case where the command to rest and treat it as an extra Sabbath. So now I explain that. We're going to look at our slideshow again. I'm going to explain the month a little bit more in detail. Okay, here's some things you need to know. The Hebrew word translated as new moon in the Bible is Kodesh, which I already mentioned, which literally means renewed. So renewed moon would be a more accurate translation. The renewed moon is when the moon can be seen again without the aid of a telescope. So it's possible to see it again. Notice I didn't say when it is seen again, but when it can be. The new moon on most astronomical charts, the moment when it's completely dark, 0% illumination, is not seeable without a telescope, or really for that moment even with one. Technically for that moment. All right, the biblical. Now we're going to listen a little bit more. Now the renewed moon occurs reliably at 6% illumination. When you have 6% illumination of the surface of the moon, you now people can reliably see it. It can be reliably seen without a telescope. And the moon reaches this illumination 21 hours and 15 minutes after the new moon or the dark moon. So after the one on the astronomical chart, 21 hours, 15 minutes later, it gets where it becomes seeable. The first biblical day that the renewed moon occurs before sunset is the first day of the biblical month. And this might actually be nightfall, but either way, the point is it has to be before people go out fishing, and preferably before sunset, so they don't even bother getting ready to go to their work. If that night, on the one case where you can't work on the Sabbath, on the one case where it's a Sabbath, you can't work. Again, it cannot be determined by looking. When you see it at night, if you see it at night, you're seeing it too late. The next day will begin after sunset. The next biblical day will begin after sunset on the next day. So now, since lunar cycles vary between 29 days and 5 hours to 29 days and 19 hours, then the biblical month can either be 29 or 30 days. So it's not always the same. For the most part, out of 235 lunar cycles in a 19-year cycle called the Metonic cycle, 110 will be 29-day months called deficit months, and 30 days will be full months, and 125 will be full days with 30, or also called full months, which are 30 days long. So, but it's no guarantee, and it's not even necessarily, it's not as easy as 29-30, 29-30, 29-30, as I just mentioned. You actually can end up with two of the same length in a row, and sometimes people do. So, the first month. So the next month begins the first day after 29th day of the current month, when the renewed moon occurs before nightfall. So if it's the 29th day, and we've seen the renewed moon occur at least before nightfall, but preferably before sunset, then the next day is the first day of the next month. Otherwise, the 30th day of this month this month is a full month, not a deficit month, and you get the 30th day. So because it can never go more than 30 days, which is important to know, which we'll discuss why it's so important later. Now the renew, and this is very important to understand, the renew moon occurs even if the moon is blocked from view. So if it's I guess I'll discuss that right now. If it's like this happened in Israel, one year that people were observing for the new moon to declare when the 7th month started, which we'll get into a little later, when there's all these feasts. But it was hazy and cloudy for a whole week, and they never saw it till more than a week after the null moon, and so they couldn't actually do it by observation. But does that mean the renewed moon didn't occur? Well, by the time they saw it, it was a half moon, a quarter moon. Well, does that mean it didn't occur? No, it just means they couldn't see it. So it's important to understand it occurs whether you see it or not. And we'll see why that matters a little later. Now, I got some pictures here to illustrate. Now, actually see, these are actual photos taken with a telescope, and you can see the new moon 0%. It's barely visible at the aid of a telescope. Technically, you see a little edge right there. Technically, they didn't catch in that exact moment. But there even that little bit, it looks like a little white line on one little smidgen. So they got very close though. And you can see, even with a telescope, it's even hard to see it. This one's also with a telescope. It's 6% illumination. And you can see how it's kind of like a long curved, a really skinny banana or something like that. I mean, or pepper with pointy ends and crescent, a very thin crescent. But it's visible it's visible even without the aid of a telescope. Now here's a couple of pictures of them actually in the sky. Those were closest with the telescope. And here's the first one, in a cloudless sky, no haze or nothing. And as you can see, you can barely see the line. You can see the line, and that's at 6%. But that's why it looks like it's 6% illumination if you're out there looking. And of course, people you have to have at least 20/20 vision, or you're not going to see it. But someone with normal vision will be able to see it. Now the squint hard, that's again if there's no clouds or nothing. And then here's another one that was taken. They took with a blue lens to make it a little more obvious. And again, you can see that there's it's 6% of it is indeed lit up. If you take a look, it looks a little bit more in this line, but the other part's kind of not as bright. So this is what you people can see. Now I got one more thing here to show the null moon, or also called new moon on astronomical charts, versus the Kodesh right here. And this is a calendar. This is a calendar with the moon phases from June 2019. On June 3rd, the new moon occurred, the astronomical new moon, the null moon, the dark moon. And as you can see in the picture, there's absolutely no coloration. But if you go here to the 5th, there's that sliver we saw, that's 6%. And the 4th got skipped completely. And there's a little bitty line if you look real careful, but it wasn't enough. So in this case, it was 2 days, not 1 day after the null moon. It's always going to be 1 day, at least it's null moon, but not 1, 2. So there's an example. Okay, now we shall go back. We shall go back to our text. Although made a lot clearer, and you'll see how all these things come into play. So to recap, morning and evening are transition periods. And evening in the transition period, there's an overlap from the day that's ending and the next day it's beginning. Technically, the middle, right, when the sunlight's at 50%, is technically the even, but again, hard to observe. So that, and then the new moon occurs. That's not the new moon, the astronomical new moon, but the renewed moon when it's becomes seeable, which is again a 6% illumination, which happens 21 hours and 15 minutes after the dark moon or null moon. Okay, now, but now the question, of course, we have months in a year. We have days in a year, and months in a year, and we have weeks. But how do we know how long a year is? As I mentioned, it'll be 12 or 13 months. We're going to start unraveling that right now. And we're going to start here in Exodus 9:31 through 34. And the wax and the barley were smitten. For the barley was in the ear, and the flax was polled. And the wheat and the rye were not smitten, for they were not grown up. And Moses went out of the city from Pharaoh and spread forth his hands of the Lord, and the thunderings and the hail ceased, and the rain was not poured upon the earth. And Moses saw the rain and the hail and thunders were ceased. He sinned yet more and hardened his heart, he and his servants. So put this in context. This is one of the judgments, one of the 10 judgments that led to the Exodus, that led to Passover, when the last judgment occurred. So this is in that same month. And I want you to notice this key thing. The barley was in the ear. And not as maybe important, the flax was not bolled, which is kind of like cotton. You got a little hard shell, and you got the soft part in the middle of you. So you got to pick, and the bowl wasn't opened and all turned all soft stuff. But notice the wheat and the rye are not smitten. So this is our big clues, because they're not grown up. So this is in that time when the barley is in the ear. It's formed little ears. They haven't necessarily opened, but it's formed ears. And this is a very important grain crop in Egypt and the world, in the ancient world in general. Okay, so that's our first clue: is barley needs to be in the ear when? We're going to see this right here in Exodus 34:18 through 22. The feast of the unleavened bread you shall keep. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, as I command you, in the time of the month of Abib. For in the month of Abib you came out of Egypt. All over the matrix is mine, for every firstling among the cattle, whether ox or sheep, that is male. For the firstling of an ass you shall redeem with a lamb, and you shall redeem it. And if you redeem him not, then you shall break his neck. All the firstborn of your sons you shall redeem, and none shall appear before me empty. 6 days you shall work, from the 7th day you shall rest. In every time in the harvest you shall rest. And you shall observe the Feast of Weeks, the first fruits of the wheat harvest, and the Feast of Ingathering at the year's end. Okay, so now we're going to look at our next one. So that when this barley is in the ear is Abib, which indeed literally means green ear. Okay, it sounds like Tel Aviv, hill of the spring. It's how sometimes translated, but literally it means green ear. The month of the green ears when they came out of Egypt, the green ear of barley. Okay, and we'll see how that plays out a little bit more. But I want you to notice you have this other holiday, this other feast that's coming up, called the wheat harvest, the first fruit, the Feast of Weeks. So it's a number of weeks after the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and it's about the wheat harvest. So the wheat harvest has to fall at the right time for it to be observed in this Feast of Weeks, because it's the first fruits, which means, again, the other one was the first fruit of the barley, which we'll see. So you can't harvest any barley. They also can't harvest any wheat. So they got that separation, and we'll look at the exact size of that in a little bit. But they have to both be in their beginning harvest era. There's a period of harvest, and it'll last about 6 weeks for both. So it's got to be there. You can let it sit a little bit, but you can't let it sit forever. It'll go bad on you or whatever. It'll dry out and whatever. So you have to get it while it's dry, the harvest time, but not for but it can't just stay there forever. Insects or whatever will eat it. So you have the harvest season. It's got to be in the harvest season. The barley for this Abib, this month of Abib, and when they came out of Egypt, and then the wheat harvest. And there's an ingathering, and there's very different kinds of fruits and things in Israel. And some things like almonds actually blossom in the winter, and they produce almonds in the winter. And if I remember correctly, olives are a little later. So, ingathering of what in particular, we're going to look at why it is in particular has to be ingathered. There's something in particular. We're going to look at that next. All right, in Deuteronomy 16:9 through 13. 7 days you shall number unto you. Begin to number the 7 weeks from such time as you begin to put the sickle to the corn. And you shall keep the Feast of Weeks in the Lord your God with a tribute of a free will offering of your hand. You shall give the Lord your God according to as the Lord your God has blessed you. You shall rejoice for the Lord your God, you and your son, your daughter, and your manservant, and your maidservant, and the Levite within your gates, the stranger, and the fatherless, and the widow that are among you. The place of the Lord shall choose to place his name there. And you shall remember that you were a bondman in Egypt, and you shall observe and do these commandments. And you shall observe this Feast of Tabernacles 7 days after you've gathered in your corn and your wine. Okay, first of all, I want to clarify something. Corn here doesn't mean maize, like we're used to in America. People call corn, they call Native American maize, corn in America here. It means grain. It's an English word for grain. That's why it was called corn, because corn had grains. It was a cereal crop. But this one here, of course, we've already looked at. Then we put the sickle to the grain. The grain's barley. You're gonna number 7 weeks. Okay, so 7 weeks after the barley one, then you can put the sickle in. Then you're gonna have then after that, then you can put the sickle to the wheat. Okay, but notice this. Notice there's other kinds of grain. Remember we mentioned rye earlier, for example. There's other, besides wheat and barley, there's other grains. And they don't all ripe at the same time. But they are finished by a certain point. But the key thing here, the ingathering, is your grains and your wine. So your grape harvest has to be over by the start of the Feast of Tabernacles. So you've got this frame, so you got this time frame. You have this time frame. 1 month, when we'll look at which month it is, we'll look at 1 month, but this one festival its month has to begin as a certain part in that month, certain date has to be, the barley has to be harvestable. And on the other end, the grapes have to have already been harvested when this other festival occurs. We'll look at their exact timing here in a minute. But that's important. So it's not a lunar solar calendar, some people say. It is a solar agriculture calendar, agrarian calendar, crop count. It's based on crops. Well, so those crops are going to go roughly the same time of the year. And again, a Gregorian year is based on really the relative position on January 1st every year. The sun's in the same relative position as it is January 1st every year. The relative position of the earth as it goes around the sun, right? Well, I should say the earth's in the same relative position. But not so with this, because remember, there's about 365 and a little bit smidgen below 365 and 1/4 days per year. That's why you have a leap day every 4 years, most, except for the rule where you don't, except for the one exception. And that's why you have that. So on that day, the Earth's in the same relative position as the sun, little range. Well, even if they're just 2930 like that, you get 12 months, you end up with 354 days. Well, the barley crop, sun rules the day. When it matures, everything's ruled by the sun again, as much as anything else, and by the sun. So in those seasons we talked about, so it's going to come roughly the same time on what we call the Gregorian calendar in the same range every year. So now eventually you're going to get where if you just say 12th month, next month's the first month, you're going to have a problem. So what you have to do, because you're losing 11, you're going backwards 11 days every month, every year, relative to the Gregorian calendar, relative to the position of the Earth to the sun. So what you have to do is you get back far enough, and you say, well, wait, the barley's not ripe, it's not going to be ripe in time. We got to add a month where the grapes aren't going to be able to be harvested, or they're going to be way too long after they're harvested or whatever. It's going to be too early. They're not going to be harvested. We've got to add a month, so you end up with a leap month. And so out of every 3 years, you'll end up with at least one leap month, and sometimes in a 3-year cycle, you'll end up with 2. So, but the important thing is, so the year dates, how we're deciding when the year begins is based on these crops. First of all, barley. Second of all, grapes, and as a check perhaps, and also the wheat has to line up. Those three got to line up. So So now we're going to look at what defines the first month, since I've explained. Exodus 12, 2 through 6. This month shall be unto you the beginning of months, for the first month of the year to you. You shall say to all the congregation of Israel, on the 10th day of this month, they shall take them every man a lamb, according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for a house, and if the house will be too small for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next to his house take it according to the number of sows. Every man according to his eating shall take account for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish and male without first year. You shall take it from the lamb, for the sheep, or the goats. You shall keep it up to the 14th day of the same month, and the whole assembly of the congregation shall kill it at evening. Okay, so on the 14th day of the first month is when you kill the lambs. And we already looked at that month's called Abib, and it's when the barley goes. So the barley determines the first month. This is the beginning of the months. This is the first month of the year on the biblical calendar. And it's the only one the Bible, it's the only one that God gave a name to, and it's Abib. Again, the month of the green ear. So, and perhaps the Egyptians had that name for it as well. I'm not sure. So they may have already been familiar with it, but nonetheless, God actually calls it Abib. So that's our first. So there we have it. The first month has to be like that. And now we see to establish, is it Passover exactly, the 14th day, or is it another day on the first month, or is it the first day of the first month? We're going to look at this, and we're going to see this by looking here at these feasts, at the biblical feasts in Leviticus, the timing of them, because they're when the wheat, the barley and the wheat cannot be harvested until an event occurs. So they must be harvestable during this period, but they can't be harvested until the event occurs. And on the other end, the grapes must be harvested before the last one occurs. So the first month is with the barley. Now let's read this. Leviticus 23, 4 through 8. These are the feasts of the Lord, even the holy convocations shall proclaim their seasons. The 14th day of the first month at even is the Lord's Passover. On the 15th day of the month is the feast of unleavened bread in the Lord. 7 days you must see unleavened bread. The first day you shall have a holy convocation. You shall do no servile work therein. And you shall make an offering made by fire in the Lord 7 days. In the 7th month is a holy convocation. You shall do no servile work therein. So look what we have on the 14th day. Remember, the 14th day is not, 15th day is a holy convocation to the Lord, and it's a Sabbath. You can't do any regular work, and you have to congregate just like on the Sabbath. So you're getting an extra Sabbath unless the Sabbath 15th happens to fall on the regular Sabbath. So, and the same thing for this, but the 14th day is the day the lambs are killed, and it's the day of preparation. And but I want you to notice that overgap thing plays it again, because notice there's 7 days of unleavened bread. Well, how can there be 7 days if you have to start eating unleavened bread on the 14th day? Because at Passover, you got to have unleavened bread. Because again, evening that ends Passover, that ends the day of preparation, also begins the 15th day. So that same evening is when you have to start eating unleavened bread, and so you end up with unleavened bread for 7 days. So you get 7 full days, and of course, so that's how that works. So it's the evening that ends of the 14th day, you're already eating unleavened bread, which is also the same that begins the 15th day. Now, let's look at Leviticus 23, 11 through 14. And we're going to read some more conditions. And he shall wave, and he read it down to exactly about this barley. And he shall wave the sheaf before the Lord to be accepted for you. On the morrow after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave it. You shall offer that day when you wave the sheaf of a he lamb without blemish, the first fruit for a burnt offering unto the Lord. And the meat offering thereof shall be 2 tenths of dill, fine flour, mingled with oil, an offering made by fire unto the Lord for a sweet savor. And the drink offering thereof shall be wine, the 4th part of a hin. And you shall neither eat bread, nor parched corn, nor green ears, until the solemn 7th day you brought an offering unto your God. Shall be a statute forever throughout your generations through all your dwellings. Okay, so notice you have to bring a sheaf. Everyone's growing barley, has to bring a sheaf and they cannot, they cannot. And notice it has to be at least green ears, and they can be roasted because they're eating. They're eaten if you look at this in context, and that's kind of the context: bread, parched green ears. It's not you're not you can't eat last year's. You can't eat this year's crop. Okay, and you're probably out of this year's crop. You're out of last year's barley, anyways, probably by this point. But it's referring to this year's crop. They at least got to be green ears on what? On the first day of the month? No, they have to at least be green ears. They're roastable. Important, but green ears, they have to be at least be green ears on the day, on the morrow after the Sabbath that follows Passover. So that would and that's going to vary. Since it's the same day of the week, we'd say Sunday. It's going to vary the day of the month. So somewhere between the 15th and 21st day of the month, whichever day that happens to be the one that happens to be a Sunday, the day after the Sabbath. And we'll see very clearly it's referring to the day after the weekly Sabbath, not the specials, not the high Sabbath that occurred on the 15th day or the 21st day. But we'll see very specifically it's referring to the weekly Sabbath in a moment. So it's what state will it be in then? Well, it's the beginning of the month. How do you know? Well, a proposed test to know. Finding a green barley, squeezing between your finger and your forefinger and your thumb, and seeing if the liquid comes out on the first day of the month, for example. But is that really how we're supposed to determine it? Well, we'll look at that a little bit later. But again, the important point is it's not the condition of the barley on the first day of the month. It's on the day of, could be as late as the 21st day of the month. It's conditioned then. Now, this brings us, now we're going to talk about that next one, about the one with the wheat. Leviticus 23:15-17. You're counting from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the day you brought the sheaf for the wave offering, 7 days shall be complete. On the morrow of the seventh Sabbath shall number 50 days, and you shall offer a meat offering to the Lord. Shall bring it out of your habitations, 2 waves loaf of 2 steel. It shall be fine flour, shall be baked with leaven. They are first fruits unto the Lord. Okay, notice first fruits again here. These are the first fruits of the wheat. But notice, the morrow after the Sabbath, you count what? Sabbaths. 7 Sabbaths shall be complete. Total of 50 days. And even the morrow after the 7th Sabbath. So it's, again, a day after a Sabbath. In the 50 days is where we get Pentecost from. If you grew up calling things Pentecost, which comes from Greek, which means 50th day. The Hebrew word is Shavuot, literally weeks. And we looked at weeks earlier, because a week is 7 days. You got 7 weeks. In the day that's really beginning another week, the first day of the 8th week is when you do this. In our wheat, and it's the same condition, first fruits. So the wheat cannot be harvested either. So first fruits likewise has to follow in the range of the wheat harvest, when the wheat is harvestable. And this becomes a little bit more clear right here as we continue on Leviticus 23:20-22. The priest shall wave them with the bread of first fruits of a wave offering for the Lord. For the 2 lambs, they shall be holy to the Lord for the priest. He shall proclaim the same day a holy convocation to you. Shall do no servile work, and shall be a statute forever in all your dwellings throughout your generations. And when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not make clean riddance of the corners of your field when you reap. Neither shall you gather any gleaning of your harvest. You shall lead them to the poor and to the stranger. I am the Lord your God. So I want you to notice here again another holy convocation, another Sabbath, another high Sabbath here, and it's about the first fruits. But notice this thing about the harvest. You're not to harvest them, and then when you can harvest right after this. you get some instructions about the harvest. You're not to leave a little edge around, not to get every last bit. And gleanings, if you drop something, gleanings, if you go over it again and get, I'm sorry, not if you drop something. Drop something, you're not supposed to pick it up either. But gleaning is if you go over, let's say you have a tree, apple tree, and you go get all the ripe apples one day. You go back later, and there's more ripe apples, and you go that second time. It's called gleaning. Okay. Well, same thing here. If some more wheat grows up and matures a little later, whatever, you're not to go glean it. But the point is, the reason why you now get these agricultural instructions of how to take care of your harvest, your wheat harvest in this context, is because now you can. So again, this other holiday, it's counted off the one that can be the 15th to 21st of the first month. Is counted off 50 days. Remember, our months aren't even. So occur in the third month, which I discuss a little bit more. I discuss a little bit more about the observation of Pentecost, or what's it remembering. Okay, I talked about the commemoration of Pentecost. What's it commemorating is in the third month. Is going to be somewhere in the third month always. That third month, and then in particular the day of this third month, which are like, if I remember, I can range from like the 6th to the 14th or something like that. It has to again be inside the wheat harvest window. Can't be too late. The wheat's already harvested or it's going to go bad. Can't be too early. The wheat can't be harvested. It's got to be in the harvest window of the wheat. Okay, Leviticus 23:25. We're going to look at that. We're going to keep moving. Because we got to remember one more about the grapes, and when does that occur? We're going to move towards that and see. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel, saying, in the 7th month, the first day shall have a Sabbath, a memorial blowing of trumpets, a holy convocation. You shall do no servile work therein. You shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord." First, I want you to notice the Lord spoke unto Moses. These are not Jewish holidays. They're not the Mosaic holidays. They're the holidays of Yahweh, of Yahuwah, of the Lord God Almighty. They're the holidays of the Bible. Okay, these are biblical holidays. I want you to notice this. Again, they're not Jewish or rabbinic or holidays, they're biblical holidays. Just want to point that out to you. And notice the first day of the 7th day is also a Sabbath. Well, this is why you have to be left to know before nightfall so they don't desecrate it. They're not supposed to be out working on the Sabbath. And what if they were out working, and say they're off in the Lake Sea of Galilee, and in Jerusalem they saw the crescent. They may not even know. The word may not get to them. They have to know ahead of time before they cast their nets, before they start their work day, where or not it is. Again, preferably before the sunset, but definitely by nightfall, they have to know. So therefore, now we're going to move on. So the 7th month. Okay, so that's 6 months later than the first one, right? There's 6 months have gone by. Again, a period of roughly 117 days. Okay, has gone by. All right, assuming they're 30, 29, 30, 29, 30, 29 like that, or 29, 30, 29, 30. You got the even number 29 regular months, deficient months. Okay, the 117 days have gone by from the first day of the first month to the first day of the 7th month. But that's not when the grapes have to be right either. It's not the first day. We haven't seen that yet. We haven't even mentioned about the grapes or anything yet. Remember, it was at Tabernacles. That wasn't Tabernacles. Well, let's look at the next one. Leviticus 23, 26 through 28. The next holiday that's on the calendar. The 10th day of the 7th month, there should be a day of atonement. It shall be a holy convocation to you. You shall afflict your souls and offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord. And you shall do no work in the selfsame day as a day of atonement, to make an atonement for you before the Lord your God. Okay, so here's the first thing I want you. So here's the thing I really want to draw out to you. This is on the 10th day of the 7th month. Of course, so you have to get the first day right. I mean, as we described before, so you can count at the 10th day, right? So you got the 10th day, and this is a holy convocation. And everyone's to fast on this day. And, this whole fasting thing is very serious. Says we're going to look. Is this the day you're going to be made atone for? Leviticus 23:29-32. For whatsoever so shall not be afflicted on the same day, he shall be cut off among his people. Whatsoever shall not be work on a day, the same shall I will destroy from among his people. You shall do no manner of work. It shall be a statute for every generations in all your dwellings. It shall be a Sabbath of rest. You shall be afflicted, and you shall afflict your souls. In the 9th day of the month, and even from even to even, you shall celebrate your Sabbath. Okay, so notice here very seriously, you get this right. Now, cut off in context, some can mean killed, but it can also mean excised, which means you're not longer considered part of the people of Israel. Okay, so if you're going to be that kingdom within the kingdom I talked about, you have to do this. You're not be part of that. But notice if you work, you're going to be cut off. You're going to be cut off completely. You're going to be destroyed. So, very serious that you get this day right. It's obvious. It's also a Sabbath, which it says. But notice, what day does it occur? This fasting. It says the 9th day of the evening here. Well, wait. I thought it was the 10th day. Well, the 10th day was the day of time part. Remember, so it's at the 9th day that ends in the evening that ends the 9th day. So you could say it starts at sunset, the sunset that ends the 9th day and begins the 10th day. From that evening to the other evening, and it might even be till nightfall that ends the 10th day. So, be a little cautious. You might go with a 25-hour day on that day. And you just celebrate your Sabbath. Again, it's a Sabbath. Again, another example. Sabbath, and you're not counting in Hebrew date. Back to our weeks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sabbath. Sabbath means ceasing. You're ceasing from your regular activities, your servile work, what you normally do, to do things God wants you to do instead. Yahuwah wants. So that's why it says evening to evening. It's the evening that ends the 9th day and begins the 10th day to the evening that ends the 10th day. Again, super important, particularly back when the tabernacle was staying in the temple, that you got this right. Now, there's some more instructions here in Leviticus 23-29. We still don't know when the grapes have to be ready by and have to be harvested by. And we're going to see that right here. Also, on the 15th day of the 7th month, when you have gathered the fruit of the land, you shall keep a feast in the Lord 7 days. On the first month shall be a Sabbath. In the 8th day shall be a Sabbath. And you shall take upon the first day of the trees, boughs of goodly trees, branches of palm trees, boughs of thick trees, and willows of the brook. You shall rejoice for the Lord your God 7 days. You shall keep the feast of the Lord 7 days in the year. It shall be a statute for every generation. You shall celebrate in the 7th month. You shall dwell in booths 7 days. All Israelites born shall dwell in booths, that their generation may know I made the children of Israel dwell in booths, and I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Okay, notice your fruit, in particular your grapes. So on the 15th day has to fall of the 7th month, has to follow after the grape harvest is over. Which in the ancient times and today in Israel, with the exception of some foreign varieties grown at some high altitudes that didn't exist in Israel's day, this occurs within a day or two before the fall equinox. Now, this is very important. None of this sets anything by the fall and spring equinox, but the fall and spring equinox are signs, as we saw, to give us, and they give you an idea. They give you an idea of roughly what you can gauge when the barley harvest will start. It'll always start within a certain range of the fall equinox, the first become harvestable. And the grapes will always be harvested by a certain, at the latest by a certain range, with a certain number of days of the fall equinox. So the spring equinox, within a certain number of days of that, the barley harvest is going to begin. At the latest, it's going to begin, if I'm right, 10 days after the spring equinox at the latest. In the fall equinox, 2 days, if I'm right, 2 days before, 2 or 3 days before it is the latest the grape harvest is going to be over. So there's kind of little guidelines we can use to kind of give us some idea. But the important thing is these things. And notice again, it's not the first day of the month; it's the 15th day of the month. So the day that matters in the first month is not the first day of the month. You don't go out and check on the first day of the month and observe something. It is on the fifth. It is the condition of the grain on the 15th through 21st day of the month, depending on which day the first fruits fall, which day the Sunday following Passover falls, the day of preparation, as say, not the meal. Well, the meal's in that evening, but or the 15th day of the 7th month for the grapes. So now we have here's the thing. Sometimes one of those conditions on one end, the grapes or the barley, or even look at the wheat, maybe a little fuzzy, but the other end won't be. May have a thing, well, it could be this month or that month. It could start here or it could wait, because of the range of 6 weeks or whatever. But it'll never be true on both ends. So there's only going to be one period of roughly 6 months, from the 15th, say, of the 15th day of the first month to the 15th day of the 7th month. That's going to fit. So we can be certain. And so now we can be certain which month is the first month. And when the 12th month ends, we can know whether not to add another month or not for certain. But there's still some debate about how we know when the first month even begins, as well as these other things. And we're going to start with how they knew originally. Because we saw these instructions are to the priests, which we shall see right here. The priest decided, and we're going to look at how the priest decided, the high priest in particular here. Deuteronomy 33:8 through 10. Of Levi, he said, let your thumb in your room be with your Holy One, whom you did prove a Messiah, and with whom you did strive at the waters of Meribah. You who said unto his father and his mother, I have not seen him, nor did they acknowledge his burden, nor knew his own children, for they observed your word and kept your covenant. They shall teach Jacob judgments and Israel your law. They shall put incense for thee and burnt whole offerings on the altar. All these days we have, all these holidays we discuss are the Lord's, Yahuwah, God's. So his priests are the ones who determine the high priest. But the high priest uses the Urim. And I discussed this in another place before. The Urim, he placed it into the breastplate over his heart. So God would answer him by it. And except when Israel was in rebellion, sometimes God would not. So the way was very simple. On the 29th day, the high priest just asked God, is tomorrow the first day of a new month and the next month or not? And if it was, the trumpet was, they told everyone knew on the 29th day the next day was going to be it. If it wasn't, everyone knew 2 days later would be it, and the next day would be the 30th day and be a regular month, not a deficient month. So that's how it worked originally. And he could just likewise. When the 12th month rolled around, do I add another month, or is this going to be the first month of the new year? And he just asked. The high priest could just ask God. God would answer him. He would tell the people. Everyone's on the same page. But that relied on Israel being obedient to God, and we know Israel has never been obedient to God for very long at a time. They were rebellious, and by King Solomon's day, we see a serious shift in how this is done. And this is in 1 Kings 6:37 through 38. In the 4th year of the foundation of the house of the Lord was laid, in the month of Ziph. In the 11th year, in the month of Bul, which is the 8th month, was the house finished throughout all the parts thereof, according to all the fashion of it. So he was 7 years in building it. wait a minute, what's this month of Zith and Bul? Remember, the only month that God explicitly named, and again, it may have even been an Egyptian name possibly, but God still gave it us. We're going to go with it. It was Abib, and that was the first month. The rest we've just been seeing are called second month, third month, whatever, just numbers. Even here, eighth month, it explains it is the month is, well, Bul is Ziph and Bul, and there's some others that in the days of Solomon that were used. They gave months names based on what the Philistines called them. And the Philistines had a similar calendar, but they did it by observation. They determined, again, remember, it wasn't just the Hebrews. A lot of these people depend on barley heavily. I mean, tax days, because April comes from the word April means to open, and it's when the barley grain opened, indicating it was ready to be harvested. So because it is somewhat tied to the sun, they could figure out. So on the 15th, it should be harvested, and that was why tax day was then, because they needed grain for Rome. So, and today we still have tax day in the U.S. In many countries we inherited from the Romans on the 15th of April. But so that but the Philistines, so it wasn't uncommon to have the same way, because the Roman calendar originally started in March, by the way. That's why December's 10th month, February 12th month, March was the first month originally. So why? So he went to these named months from the Philistines, who did it by observation. And they didn't actually care about, giving to the Lord God the first fruits. They just went out and squeezed the barley grain with their finger and thumb, and said, "Okay, look what came out. It's the first day of the month. Look what came out. This is the first day of the year." They relied on seeing it, and even then their observation system wasn't perfectly observation, because of cloud cover and whatever, but they'd say, well, if we didn't see it, if the day after the 29th day, on the 29th day, we see the crescent moon, early enough, and they didn't even do it at 3 a.m. or whatever. They didn't care, because they were trying to keep God's calendar. They go by observation and say, okay, it's the beginning of the first day of the month. And if they didn't see it because of cloud cover or whatever, they knew there couldn't be more than 30 days. So, okay, we didn't see it one more day of this month, and then the next day is the beginning of the first day of the next month. They did totally by observation, and that's what Israel started doing when they were rebelling against God, and he wasn't answered by the Urim and Thummim. Solomon didn't consult with the Lord here. The Lord would have answered him, but he didn't. He has now adopted the Philistine method by observation, which is what the Sadducees also had in the time of the temple, which the Sadducees also had, and the Karaites today use. But it all goes back to the Philistines in these months. So this observation alone system came from idolatry, ultimately. Now, not from the instructions of the Father, which of course were based on the priest asking him and him telling him. Now, Nehemiah 2:1, we're going to see another shift. And it came to pass in the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of Artaxerxes the king, that the wine was before him, and I took up the wine and gave it to the king, and I had not before time been sad in his presence. Nisan, well, if you get a rabbinic calendar, if you get a rabbinic calendar today, you'll see the first month, the one the Bible calls Abib, is Nisan. Now, this wasn't because they left the promised land in little Japanese cars made in Japan. No, this was called that because that's what the Babylonians called it. And the Babylonians didn't do it by observation, they did it by calculation. They calculated it way out. And the thing was, later the rabbis adopted the Metonic cycle by a Greek guy, where he observed that, basically, as I mentioned before, every 19 years, there's kind of repeating the lunar cycle, but it's off by, if I remember, like 8 minutes per 19 years. So it predicts the new moon. The new moon at the end, the last new moon will occur at a certain point, and it really occurs 8 minutes later, I think it is, or 8 minutes earlier. And it may not seem like a big deal 1 year. But when you have 119-year cycles like they did, now you're off by 800 minutes. And it can even affect you so that 2013, by using a system similar to the Babylonian system where they kept the Babylonian names, they actually ended up in Israel. The ones who insisted on going with the rabbinic calendar actually started Passover after the barley harvest was completely harvested. So this calculated method also comes from idolatry. See, so what you have is what we see here. We've got three methods that we've talked about. The method God gave, where the priest just asked him, and he told him on both which day a month began, which month began a year. The observation method, which came from idolatry through the Philistines and passed up through the Pharisees to the Karaites today, and then the Babylonian method, which passed up to the Pharisees. Passed up to the Sadducees to the Karaites today, and the Babylonian method, which passed up through this long calculation that passed up from the Pharisees to the rabbis today. Well, there's no Urim and Thummim. That's very plain from the text of the Bible. There's no priest. There's no temple. So what do we do? Well, what they do in Yeshua's day is what we're going to do. And what they did was what I do. In Yeshua's day, because the Sadducees and the Pharisees were bitter enemies, so the Romans came, and they were forced to work together. And the Pharisees in this deal, they came with kind of a power-sharing arrangement. And the Pharisees got control of the synagogues, which you see over and over again. Sadducees were in charge of the temple. And they didn't agree on the date, the dates always, because a lot of years they matched it, but some years they didn't. We've seen. So they came up with a system, so they matched, because it's super important they match, because, well, the Pharisees are telling people to show up at the temple, say on Tuesday for Passover, and the Sadducees, said Monday. They're showing up a day late, and no one showed up hardly on the regular day, on the day the Sadducees said. So they came up with a system of only calculating 3 years at a time. Remember, 3-year cycle. You're gonna have at least one late month. 3 years at a time. And what you're calculating is when the new moon becomes observable, which is very calculable, as I said before. You can calculate very specifically when it will be observable. And they compared that to sunset and nightfall to come up with one a month. And again, they looked at both ends and came up with when the year was. And we know they got it right, particularly in 31 AD, because Messiah, Yeshua, had to die on the exact days on God's calendar, on the biblical calendar, not when the Sadducees and Pharisees said, but on God's calendar, to fulfill prophecy, which I will discuss in greater detail when we look at Passover and the like, and those other spring holidays next year. But we can be certain they got it right, and that's what we use here at the House of Truth. That's what I use at the House of Truth. I reverse engineered what they did, and we use that to determine the days. Again, it's neither calculated nor observation. It's calculation of when the new moon will be observable, and also you can calculate it very accurately when the barley harvest will first be harvestable, and when the grapes will in the last day the grapes will have to been finished being harvested. So it's very calculable. So that's what we do. That's how you resolve that issue. And then when Messiah comes, he'll straighten out the rest. Now we're gonna look at one last thing here, and this is in Ezekiel 45, 18 through 21. We're gonna just clear up some. I'm just gonna clear up a few things people have asked and wondered about that just aren't clear. We're gonna start here in Ezekiel 45, 18 through 21. Thus says the Lord God, in the first month and the first day, you shall make a young bullock without blemish and cleanse the sanctuary. The priest shall take the blood of the sin offering, put on the post of the house, and upon the four corners of the saddle of the altar, upon the posts of the gate of the inner court. And so you shall do the 7th day of the month for everyone that errs, and for him that is simple, so you shall reconcile the house. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, you shall have a Passover, a feast of 7 days, and unleavened bread shall be eaten. Okay, now here's the thing they'll say. I want you to notice here. The first, Ezekiel said the first day of the first month of the first day is what? The month of Passover. Now in Ezekiel 40, verse 1, in I guess it's Aramaic, it's the word Rosh Hashanah, that phrase, the head of the year, the only time it appears in the Bible. The Bible applies it to what? The first day of the first month. However, the first day of the 7th month is what the Bible calls it Shopharim, the day of trumpets, or literally the day of alarming, Yom Teruah, the day of alarming, the 7th day. But the rabbis call that Rosh Hashanah, in direct contradiction to God's word. God says Rosh Hashanah is the first day of the first month. And again, they got that from the Babylonians, who had 2 yearly cycles with 2 new years. They had one that went from the final harvest to the next final harvest, and they had another one that went from the first harvest of the barley grain to the next harvest. You know, kind of like in America, we may have a school year and a civil, and a calendar year, and there's other cases to a business year. Business may not, its first quarter may or may not be January 1st. And whatever makes sense for them, right? Or an agricultural year, whatever, right? Well, same idea. They had 2 years. In the 7th month on the biblical calendar, around the first day of it, remember they adopted the Babylonian calendar, which we plainly saw. They were the reason why Nehemiah they did this is because the Persians also adopted that calendar. So adopt that calendar. So when they lived under the rule of the Persians, they kind of had to go along with the Persian dates, okay? But now we can correct it because we're not under the thumb of the Persians. But in any case, Rosh Hashanah is not called Shopharim, Yom Teruah, the Feast of Trumpets. Rosh Hashanah is rebellion against the Word of God. We should not do it, no matter how much you like apples and honey. So here's the next little thing I want to clarify is because people say, well, where do I go? Do I go by when I see the crescent moon is observable where I live? Now on the Sabbath, that's of course a no-brainer. You obviously got to go by sundown where you live and so on. But for the months, well, right here, Ezekiel 14:16 clarifies this for us. And it came to pass that when his left all nations which came against Jerusalem shall even go up from year to year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and keep the Feast of Tabernacles. Of course, this King is Messiah. The place is Jerusalem. And notice, it's going to be when he sets it. At where? Based on what? Conditions at Jerusalem. And so for that reason, in the house of truth, we use the same day on the Gregorian calendar, the same daytime part that is in Jerusalem. So like this year, this year, Yom Teruah, Feast of Trumpets, occurs. The daytime part occurs on September 9th. It's coming up Thursday in Jerusalem, going by the system, the biblical system, going by again calculating what's observable, which they did in Yeshua's day, which plainly worked, which plainly got it right. It's best we can do for now. So we're going to do that the same thing in Oklahoma and Texas, wherever like that as well, anywhere else on the earth. So everyone's in sync because everyone's certainly going to be in sync and using Jerusalem time when Messiah is reigning. And one last thing I want to clarify about months, as I mentioned, between 29 months and 30-day months, and people sometimes get tripped up about this. And I'm going to explain right here. Revelation 11:22-3. For the court which thou the temple leave out, and measure it not, for it is given to the Gentiles, and the only city shall they tread in the fort underfoot 40 and 2 months. I got my 2 witnesses, they should prophesy 1,203 score days clothed in sackcloth. Okay, so that's 1,260 days. 42 times 30 is 1,260. So months, when it's not talking about first month, second month, or with respect to the holidays, or a particular month of the year, but just months, a time measurement. You always use if it's just months, it's the regular month. The word regular doesn't even have to be applied. You never use deficit months when you're making those kind of things. So that's why Noah, people get tripped up. It says he was in there 150 days and he was in there 5 months. Well, it didn't mean 5 months defined by new moon to new moon, from Kodesh to Kodesh, like normal. 5 regular months, regular sized months, which would be 150 days for 5. So now I hope this explanation of the biblical calendar helps you, has helped you, and to understand how this really works. And so remember again. Remember, this is all, again, as I mentioned